My girlfriend texted, "I need space. Don't contact me." One day before our trip. I replied, "Okay." Then I quietly changed one reservation. 3 days later, she finally checked social media and called me screaming, after seeing who I wasn't vacationing alone with. But before you understand who was in that photo, and why seeing it made her call 47 times in 2 hours, you need to understand what kind of man receives a text like that the night before a trip he'd been planning for 4 months, and just says, "Okay," not in defeat, not in resignation. In the specific calm of someone who has been watching a pattern long enough to know exactly what it means, and who has already decided quietly what comes next. My name is Caleb Ross. I'm 34. I design and build custom furniture, not mass production, not flat pack, actual, handmade pieces that take weeks and outlast the people who commission them. My workshop is in Sutter Falls, Oregon, a town of about 11,000 people tucked between the Coast Range and the valley, where the winters are gray and long and people stay because they've decided somewhere quiet is worth more than somewhere loud. I work with my hands because I learned early that the most honest things are made slowly. That patience applied to wood, understanding its grain, working with its nature rather than against. It produces something that couldn't be rushed into existence. I've been applying the same principle to people for years. It works better with wood. My girlfriend's name was Sienna. She was 31, a graphic designer, freelance, talented in the way of people who make everything look effortless because they've put in the hours to make effortlessness possible. We'd been together 3 years. She was quick and creative and funny in the sharp way of someone whose mind moves faster than most conversations, and for the first 2 years, being around her felt like being pulled forward by something exciting. Then the pattern started. The pattern had a name, though I didn't call it that for a long time. The first time it happened was 8 months into our relationship. We'd had a minor disagreement. The specifics aren't important. The kind of friction that happens when two people are still learning each other's edges. Nothing significant. Nothing that required more than a conversation. Instead, Sienna went quiet. Not the quiet of someone processing. The deliberate quiet of someone withdrawing. Texts that came slower, then stopped. A presence that became selective. 2 days later, she reappeared. As if nothing had happened, warm and present, and when I gently raised what we'd been discussing, she said she'd just needed a little space and she was fine now. I accepted it. People need space. I understand that. The second time was 5 months later. Different disagreement, same pattern. The withdrawal, the silence, the return without resolution, the "I just needed space" that closed the subject before. It was actually closed. The third time I started to see the shape of it. By the time the text arrived the night before our trip, I'd watched the pattern complete itself 4 times. I knew its duration, 2 to 4 days. I knew its trigger, any moment of friction or disappointment that Sienna didn't want to process directly. And I knew its function, not rest, not genuine solitude, but the leverage of absence. The use of withdrawal as a way to reset a conversation on her terms rather than resolve it on honest ones. What I didn't fully know yet was what she did during the space. I was about to find out. The trip was 4 months in the making. Reyes Island, a small island off the Oregon coast, accessible by ferry, the kind of place that has one good restaurant and 3 miles of hiking trail and the specific piece of somewhere, genuinely difficult to reach. I'd booked a cabin in January for a week in May. Deposited early to get the good one. Water view, private deck, wood-burning fireplace. I'd told Sienna about it in February. She'd been excited. Genuinely, visibly excited. The kind of reaction that doesn't require performance because the pleasure is real. We talked about it across the months. What we'd cook in the cabin kitchen. Which trails we'd take first. Whether we'd kayak the northern cove or save that for the last day. 4 months of small conversations that built something neither of us had named, but both of us understood as significant. A trip that meant something more than the trip. 3 weeks before departure, we'd had an argument. Not a catastrophic one. The kind that surfaces when two people have been leaving certain things unsaid for long enough that they accumulate pressure. The argument was about the pattern itself, which I'd finally named directly. The withdrawals, the silence as a tool, the way significant things got closed rather than resolved. Sienna heard it as criticism. Maybe it was. But it was also accurate. She said I was controlling. I said I was asking for direct communication. She said I didn't understand how she processed things. I said I was trying to understand, which was the point of the conversation. It didn't resolve. She went quiet for 4 days. She came back warm and present, and when I tried to return to it, she said she was fine. She'd just needed space. Could we please just be okay? I said yes, but I filed it differently than I had before. The night before the trip, I was in the workshop until 9, finishing a commission piece. Dining table for a family in Portland, white oak, hand-planed surface, the kind of work that requires the last hours to be as careful as the first. I came home to the apartment. We didn't share, but where I kept a drawer and she kept a drawer, the particular domestic middle ground of a 3-year relationship that hadn't yet resolved its own question. My phone was on the workbench. I saw the text at 9:47. I need space. Don't contact me. That was the entire message. I stood in the workshop for a moment holding my phone. The table behind me was finished. It would last 100 years if someone took care of it. The grain had gone exactly where the wood intended. I typed one word. Okay. Then I put the phone face down and stood at the workbench for a long time thinking about patterns, about the shape of things that repeat, about the difference between wood that can be worked and wood that has already decided what it is. Then I went inside and I made one phone call. Before we go any further, if this story is already pulling you in, please subscribe right now, drop a like, leave a comment, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. It takes literally 10 seconds, and it's what keeps this channel growing, so more people can find these stories. Your support means everything. Now, back to Caleb Ross. And the one phone call that changed everything. The call was to my closest friend. Her name is Juno Park. She was 32, a marine biologist who worked out of a research station on the coast, someone I'd known since college who had been my most honest friend for 12 years for the simple reason that she said true things even when true things were inconvenient. She answered on the second ring. "It's late," she said. "What happened?" I told her. The text, the timing, the 4 months of planning, the pattern that had finally completed, itself one night too many. She was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going on the trip," I said. "Obviously." "What else?" "I'm going to change one reservation." A pause. "Which one?" "The ferry. 2 tickets instead of 1. Another pause. Longer. "Caleb, I need someone there who'll be honest with me about what I'm thinking. Someone who'll tell me if I'm wrong about the pattern. And if you're not wrong about the pattern, then I want to have spent a week thinking clearly instead of sitting in a cabin alone being managed by silence." Juno was quiet for a moment. "The cabin has a kayak," she said. "It does. And that restaurant with the crab bisque? Still there. Pick me up at 7, she said. I want to be clear about what Juno was and wasn't. 12 years of friendship. Someone who'd seen 3 of my relationships from the outside and had delivered honest assessments of all of them, including the one where she'd told me clearly I was the problem. Someone who was in a committed relationship of her own, her partner Day, a software engineer in Portland who I genuinely liked and who knew Juno and I were old friends. In the uncomplicated way of 2 people who trust each other completely. She wasn't a replacement. She wasn't a statement. She was the person I trusted most to help me see clearly when I was too close to something to see it myself. I changed the ferry reservation that night, added her name, sent her the cabin information. Then I packed my bag, set my alarm for 6, and went to sleep. The ferry left at 8:15. We stood on the deck as the coast disappeared, and Juno drank coffee and listened to me talk. Through the pattern in the way I hadn't been able to talk through it with anyone who wasn't. Sienna. She asked good questions, the kind that don't push you toward a conclusion but require you to find it yourself. When she comes back after the space, does anything actually change? No, I said. The thing that triggered the withdrawal is never addressed. It just gets covered. And you've let that happen how many times? 5. Why? I thought about it honestly. Because the alternative was a confrontation I wasn't sure she'd survive as a couple, and I kept thinking the next time she'd choose differently. Did she? She texted me the night before a 4-month planned trip. Juno looked at the water. What do you want, Caleb? Not what do you think is right, not what's fair. What do you actually want? I want a relationship where difficult things get said directly, I said. Where space means I need time to think, not I'm using absence to reset the terms. Where a disagreement ends in resolution, rather than coverage. Does Sienna want that? I looked at the island appearing in the distance. I don't think she knows how to want that yet, I said. And I don't think wanting it for her is something I can do. Juno nodded once. The island got bigger. Good crab bisque, she said. Best on the coast, I said. The week was, and I want to find the right word here, clarifying. Not dramatic. Not the performance of a good time designed to be seen. Just a week of honest company in a good place, the kind that reminds you what uncomplicated feels like after you've been living inside complicated for long enough to forget. We hiked the northern trail the first morning. The fog was still on the water and the path climbed through old growth before opening to a headland view that made both of us stop without discussing it. We kayaked the cove on day 3. We cooked in the cabin kitchen. Juno made a rice dish her mother had taught her, and I made the roasted vegetables I'd been cooking since college, and we ate on the deck while the sun went into the water. We talked about the pattern. We talked about other things. We talked about Day and about Juno's research and about a commission I'd been considering, a library installation that would require 6 months of work. I posted 2 photos, not strategically. Or, honestly, I knew Sienna followed me, knew she'd eventually check, and I didn't avoid the photos because of that. But I posted them because the moments were worth posting. The headland view, the deck dinner with 2 plates and a candle Juno had found in a drawer, normal photos, honest ones. Sienna had requested space on Thursday night. She called on Sunday evening, 47 times. I know it was 47 because I counted them afterward in my call log the way you count. Something unbelievable to make sure you've counted correctly. I let the first 12 go. Then I answered, "Who is she?" No greeting, no context. The question arriving like something that had been pressurized for 3 days and finally found an opening. "Juno," I said. "I know her name. I can see the tag. Who is she to you?" "My closest friend. You've heard me mention her. You took her on our trip." "I took her on a trip I'd planned," I said. "You told me you needed space and not to contact you. I didn't think you'd go without me." "What did you think I'd do?" A pause. "Wait. I thought you'd wait." I sat on the cabin deck with the evening water below me and held the phone and thought about that word. Wait. 5 times she'd withdrawn and I had waited. Every time, quietly, steadily, without complaint, absorbing the absence and returning to warmth when she returned, never demanding the resolution we never had. Wait had always been my answer, until it wasn't. "Sienna," I said, "I've waited 5 times. Each time, the thing we were actually trying to discuss disappeared into the waiting. I'm not doing that again." "So you brought another woman?" "I brought my friend, because I needed honest company and you told me not to contact you." Her voice shifted into something more urgent. "Come home. We need to talk." "I have 3 more days on the island," I said. "Cancel them. Please." "Joel, She caught herself. "Caleb, I'm scared." "Of what?" A long pause. "Of losing you." I looked at the water. A seal had surfaced 20 yards from the deck, regarded the world, briefly, and disappeared. "That's the first honest thing you've said to me in 3 weeks," I said. She was quiet. "I'll be home Wednesday," I said. "If you want to talk, really talk, the way we haven't been, I'll be there Wednesday evening. And until then, I'm on the island with my friend, enjoying the trip." I said goodbye and hung up. Juno appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea. "How many times did she call?" she asked. 47. She handed me a cup, sat in the other chair. "What are you thinking?" "That scared is good," I said. Scared means real. Every other conversation we've had recently has been managed. Scared is the first thing that hasn't been. "Is it enough?" "I don't know yet," I said. "Wednesday will tell me." Wednesday, I took the morning ferry back. Juno stayed another day. Her research station was closer to the island than to Sutter Falls, and she had equipment to check at a monitoring buoy nearby. We said goodbye at the dock with the easy brevity of people who know they'll talk again Thursday. "Tell me how it goes," she said. "You'll know by Friday," I said. "I know already," she said. "I just want to hear you say it." I drove back to Sutter Falls with the windows down and the coast range to my left going green in the May afternoon and thought about what Wednesday evening was going to require. Not a fight, not a verdict. A conversation, the kind we'd been avoiding for 8 months, the kind where the thing that needed saying finally got said by both people in the same room at the same time. Sienna was on my porch when I got home. She'd been there a while from the look of it. Coffee cup beside her that had gone cold. She was wearing no makeup, which was unusual for her in the way of something deliberately chosen, the presentation of a person not performing. She looked up when I came up the walk. "Hi," she said. "Hi. Can I come in?" "Yes," I said. She talked for 40 minutes, and I listened. Not the way I'd listened before, waiting for the space to close so we could return to warmth. Actually listening. To the thing underneath the thing. What came out was more honest than anything we'd managed in 3 years. She'd grown up in a house where conflict was loud and unresolved, and her particular strategy for surviving it had been disappearance, physically into her room, emotionally into her own internal world, until the temperature dropped enough to re-emerge safely. It had been a child's survival mechanism that had become an adult's relationship pattern without her fully understanding the transition. The space requests weren't manipulation in the deliberate sense. They were the only tool she had. "That doesn't make them okay," she said. "I know that. I could see you getting quieter about it. And I kept thinking I'd figure out a different way, and I kept not figuring it out." "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" I asked. "Because telling you meant having the conversation I was taking space to avoid. And now? Now I watched you go on a trip without me, and I felt something I've been protecting myself from feeling." "What?" "That you'd be fine," she said. "That you'd be genuinely, completely fine without me. And I realized I'd been using your waiting as evidence that you needed me. And when you stopped waiting, you had to figure out whether you needed me." She looked at me. "Yes. And? I do. Not in the way that's about needing someone. In the way that's about wanting a specific person." She paused. "I've been so afraid of direct conflict that I've been having a completely indirect relationship with someone who deserved better than that." The workshop was visible through the kitchen window, the building where I'd been standing. The night the text arrived, where I'd held the phone and typed one word and meant it differently than I ever had before. "I need something to change," I said. "Not you, not everything. But the pattern has to end. If something's difficult, it gets said. If you need time to process it, you ask for time to process it, and we agree on what that looks like and you come back to it. Not coverage. Resolution." "I know. Can you do that?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if I can do it alone," she said. "I think I need to talk to someone. Professionally. To understand where the pattern came from. That's honest." "Is it enough?" I looked at this woman I'd spent 3 years with. Complicated and talented and genuinely trying finally to say the true thing. "It's a start," I said. "A real one." She started seeing a therapist named Dr. Mara Nguyen 3 weeks later. It wasn't immediate transformation. That's not how patterns that took a childhood to build get undone. It was slow and not always linear, and there were moments in the months that followed where the old instinct rose and she had to choose consciously against it. But she chose. That was the difference. The first time a difficult thing came up after she started therapy, she didn't go quiet. She said, "This is hard for me to say, but I need to say it." 5 words I'd never heard from her in 3 years. I didn't make a big moment of it. I just listened. But later, in the workshop, sanding the surface of a maple sideboard I'd been building for a client in Eugene, I thought about those 5 words. About how much had to shift internally to produce them. About what it cost someone to put down a tool they've been using for 20 years. Because someone they care about finally said clearly that it wasn't working. Juno and Day came to Sutter Falls in August for a long weekend. The 4 of us hiked the Coast Range Trail above town, a climb that rewards patience with a view of both the valley and the ocean simultaneously, one of the specific gifts of living exactly where we lived. At the top, while Day and Sienna were taking photos of the view, Juno stood next to me looking out and said quietly, "She's different." "Yeah," I said. "Better different or just different?" "Better," I said. Slowly, but real. "What changed?" I thought about the ferry ride. The 47 calls. The porch with the cold coffee cup. "She got scared enough, to be honest," I said. And I stopped waiting long enough for the scared to arrive. Juno was quiet for a moment. "Good trip, though," she said. "The island. Best crab bisque on the coast," I said. "I know," she said. "I was there. Here's what one text and one changed reservation in 3 days on an island taught me about 3 years of relationship and everything that almost didn't survive it. Waiting past a certain point is not patience. It's permission. When you absorb someone's pattern without naming it, without responding to it, without letting reality arrive, you're not being loving. You're preventing them from knowing the actual cost of what they're doing. You're protecting them from the information that might finally move them. I said okay to Sienna's text because I'd run out of a different answer. And then I stopped waiting. Not in anger, not as punishment, as the simple honest act of a man who decided to live his life fully rather than on hold, and let that decision be the most truthful thing he'd said in months. She saw it in a photo, not a performance, not a statement, just evidence that I was there, present, living, choosing my own life, and in the space that my waiting had always filled, in the silence where she'd expected to find me ready to return to warmth on her schedule. She finally felt what she'd been risking and chose differently, because that's what people do sometimes when you stop removing the consequences of their choices. They find out what they actually want, and they come back. Not because you chased them, because you didn't. Subscribe if this one landed. New story every week. Drop in the comments. What was the moment Caleb should have changed that reservation sooner? Let's talk.